So what I'm going to do really quickly is I'm just going to explain to you how to add value into your scratch board. It is important to remember this logic. When we used to create value with charcoal or with markers or with pencil, we would add more pressure or add more charcoal or graphite onto our paper to make things darker. Now we are doing the complete opposite of that when you are adding value to a scratch board, okay? So you have to really think about that when you are creating this piece. Remember, the more pressure you add and the thicker your lines are in your artwork on the scratch board, the lighter the value is going to be. So you want to remove the dark values in order to create the light values. So I'm just quickly showing you here how you can see how there are different types of values you can create by just applying a certain amount of pressure or making lines lighter or darker, okay? So obviously for my first square in my value scale right here, I've created, it's completely white, and I've applied a lot of pressure, and I created a white square by just kind of scratching away. So for this next one, because I want it to be a little bit darker, if you will, what I'm going to do is I'm obviously going to leave some of those like black lines in between my lines. It's not going to be a full coverage of white. And I'm also going to apply a little less pressure so that I'm not taking away really big like lines of the scratch board. All right. And as you can see, my next part of my value scale becomes a lot darker just from making sure that I don't apply too much pressure and, you know, remove all of the black from that part of the value scale. Okay, I'm going to do the same exact thing on the next one, but it's going to get darker as we continue. So here I'm going to use more so of the tip of the scratch tool, and I'm just going a lot lighter with my strokes, okay? So you want to make sure you really focus on the pressure that you put on, because you really don't want to make things too light where you can't even see them. So I'm just showing you a quick hatching technique here. Remember, there are tons and tons of different techniques that we'll go over later on in this part of the video. So my next square is going to be a little bit lighter. As you can see, I'm not applying as much pressure. I'm leaving more black space in between each white line, and it becomes a darker value. The next one is going to be extremely light, to the point almost where you can't really even see. I'm going to make shorter strokes here of lines as well. It's not going to be as long as the ones in the beginning of my value scale. And then my last square, I'm just going to leave completely black because that's the darkest value. So think about that too. Our really dark values are just going to be left the color of the scratch board. All right, so as you can see here, we have the value scale that I just created. Remember, the more pressure you put down and the thicker your lines are, the lighter your area is going to be. The less pressure you put down, the lighter the areas are going to be. So as you can see, there's a nice gradual change from really light to medium, like gray tones, to dark. So there are a bunch of different ways you can add value to your artwork. I'm going to go over all 4 of these techniques, and you get to choose which one you like the best. So the first one that we're going to go over is cross-hatching. You've definitely heard me talk about this one before. This is the one that I like the most, but essentially what you're doing is you're creating like a grid-like pattern, and you're following the curves and the movement of the item or thing that you're drawing, or scratching away, I should say. So as you can see, the darker values over here, they are done by creating less grid patterns, okay? Whereas the lighter values over on this side are going to be created by making lines that are very close together, and you're putting a lot of pressure down. And then it gradually goes away, okay? our lightest area over here, this is hatching. So that was cross hatching. This is regular hatching. Hatching is just going in one direction, either up and down, left to right, diagonal, and essentially same thing. Applying a good amount of pressure will give you the whitest of white, and also making sure that your lines are close together, whereas applying less pressure and making sure that your lines are further apart is going to give you obviously darker values. The next value technique is stippling. Stippling is very, very time consuming when you are doing scratch art. So if you really want to do that, you may. It just does take quite a bit of time. Remember, stippling is just essentially making little dots or little curves, right? So the more dots that are closer together, the lighter your areas are going to be. The less dots that are further apart, the darker your areas are going to be. And then the next one is actually a really fun one. It's essentially called scribbling. Okay, so what you're doing is you're creating these like really organic movements. And obviously, if you continue to layer them on top of one another, you're going to get really, really light areas. Or if you just kind of scribble very lightly and really kind of keep them away from each other, you'll get darker areas. So these are just some really quick techniques to use when you are creating value on a scratch board.